I'm Len Witt, and I'm at Yale University. There's a conference going on about the new ecology of journalism, who will pay for the news. And I'm going to introduce somebody who's done some really interesting research. Where do you think, before we get started, where do you think most people are spending their time on the internet, and what time of day? So Pablo, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work you do.
Sure, my name is Pablo Boczkowski and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Communication Studies at Northwestern University. And the research you were referring to is a study that I've been doing, actually I completed it recently, called News at Work, Imitation in an Age of Information Abundance, which is also the title of the book that is coming out with University of Chicago Press in about June, July next year. And what we found in the study is that a significant proportion of online news consumers access online news at the time and place of work, whether that is in an office environment or in their home office. And that has interesting implications for the ways in which they access the news, the kind of content they access, how much time they spend, conversations they have with other people, etc. And it also has important implications for how the news gets produced by journalists and other news producers in order to try to target this new time and new place of news consumption. Because for the most part, the consumption of news before the advent of the internet as sort of a massive news source of news and information took place outside of the place of work, right, in the morning reading the newspaper or in the evening watching the television newscast.
Okay, so one of the things that you said when you were talking about this new environment that people look at the news, they spend, I think you said, like, usually just look at one page at a time, correct?
So what they do is most people engage in two different forms of online news consumption during the work hours. What I call the first visit of the day, which is sort of systematic, comprehensive. It's the first time that you sit at the computer. Usually happens either immediately before you start your workday or during the lunch break. And it's mostly focused on the homepage. It's a sort of systematic look at one or two homepages, your preferred sites, your trusted news sources during a normal news day. If there is any major news that just has happened that day, people tend to look at other sources as well. But that's sort of the first visit of the day is devoted to the homepage, and then people click on a handful of headlines that catch their attention, and they look at, they tend to read not the entire story. Basically, they look at the first paragraph and they skim the rest. So that's what I call the first visit of the day. Then people go back to these sites usually more than one time during the rest of the day in what I call the subsequent visits, which are much shorter in duration, right? Usually a matter of seconds. They want to see an update in a particular story that they were interested in, or somebody in the office environment or a friend or a family member alerts them to the existence or about the existence of a particular event that might be appealing. There is an earthquake here, or there is a major traffic congestion in the route that you usually take to go back home. So people go, look at the news for a matter of seconds, they get all the information that they need, and they leave the site. So and people tend to engage in these subsequent visits, usually more than once a day. And it's also a way to kill time, fill time, procrastinate in the workplace.
Okay, so and what was the implication of that about whether or not they will pay for online news? I think you mentioned that.
Right, my sense is that given that most people, right, are looking at homepages, right, and headlines, even when they click and they read the lead, they read the first paragraph, and then a little bit of the rest. I think most of that content is commodity content. It's content that you can find in many sources. You just happen to go to the site that you trust the most, or the site that routinely you have gone to. So what that means is that I don't think that for this kind of population, for this mode of consumption, there is a strong argument for the proposition that people will pay for the news. Because as long as someone is providing the same commodity content for free, people will migrate to those sites rather than pay. Even if the site implementing a paywall is your favorite site, people will go elsewhere. One of my favorite examples is I teach a class at Northwestern in the sociology of online news, an undergraduate seminar. About 3 or 4 years ago, I can't remember, the semester quarter started in the fall. The New York Times was about to implement the monetization of some of their content, most noticeable the editorials and the opinion pages. And so I asked the students, how many of you read X source, that source, online, blah, blah. And about a quarter of the class looked at the New York Times.com on a routine basis. Now I ask again after that, after the paywall was implemented, and that had dropped to 0. Right? Because also people were finding ways of getting the same information in blogs that had repurposed that content. So I think despite the positive implications that this could have for the economic sustainability of the industry, this being the implementation of pay models, I am highly skeptical that they would work for general interest sites. They can work for financial news because people make money out of getting that information, and they can work for specialty niche content. But I doubt that they would work, these strategies, pay strategies, for generalist sites.
So what's going to pay for journalism?
What's going to pay for journalism? Advertisement and other sources of revenue. Most likely the industry will continue shrinking in terms of the size of the labor market, and probably even the pay structure, compensation structure, will probably deflate a little bit, and some of the big players will get bigger. I do think that the wire services actually have tremendous growth opportunity at the moment, and that's why you see all the movement in the wire services sector, CNN trying to monetize its internal wire offering for the public, the merger of Thomson Reuters, etc. Because these organizations have enough resources and enough scale to provide a very wide variety of news items that then can be quickly scanned by people in the workplace.
So if somebody asked, I think the moderator during your panel said, what about day laborers or people who are not sitting in front of a computer all day?
Right.
Where are they getting their information from, and is that going to create a sort of information divide? Right,
that's a very good question. So people are still getting information from print, they're still getting information from the radio, they're still getting information from television. There is a transfer, a migration of the audience online. There is no doubt about it at this point, I don't think. But that doesn't mean that the previously dominant alternatives, right, have ceased to exist or will cease to exist in the future. As a matter of fact, as I mentioned at the panel, for the population, the segment of population which is in the lower incomes of socioeconomic, the lower stratum, of socioeconomic ladder, and especially in third world countries or underdeveloped countries where this population is actually a very important population numerically in society. For these people, the media that caters to them actually is doing much better than the media that caters to other segments of population. Newspapers, television organizations, etc., segment their products depending on the market. And there is evidence that for these people, they are still, getting the news in traditional ways. There are merchants that try to reach them because they have income that they want to spend. And traditional media makes a very important contribution to society in general, the well-being of society, by providing information to people who cannot access via other means. Although these people can access even if they don't work in a job where they have a computer or they don't have a computer at home, there are still public places like libraries, cyber cafes, call centers, etc., where they can get access to the news online. So when it comes to high quality, ethically sound journalism that'll help provide, sustain our democracy and make the public square vibrant, are you optimistic, pessimistic? Realistic. What does that mean? That there will be some of it, I think, and there will be for a long time. I think the proportion, the size of it and the proportion of what it contributes will shrink, has already shrunk, and will probably continue shrinking. But there are things emerging, and the interesting thing in part to pay attention to is whether the new developments that are emerging are actually replacing, are actually expanding, or taking us in a completely different direction. So in that sense, the future is open. But as far as the traditional players, the incumbents, I think they will see a significant reduction in size, resources, and importance, far more than what has happened now, far more. All right. Thank you very much. You're very welcome.